The world of Valrin had always been quiet and gentle, and the people who lived there believed that peace was the natural state of life. Their tall blue trees moved softly in the warm winds, their crystal lakes stayed calm under silver skies, and their cities rested lightly on the land without harm. The Valren lived slowly and carefully, and they avoided danger whenever possible. They taught their children that safety and harmony were the most important things in the universe. They trusted the wisdom of the Galactic Coalition, who guided. Young civilizations had helped solve many problems. Because of this trust, the Valren never imagined that disaster could come so suddenly or so violently. It began with tremors under the ground. At first they were small, gentle enough that they seemed like simple shifts in nature, but they grew stronger every day. The crystal lakes rippled until waves splashed across their banks. The trees shook so hard that leaves rained down like blue. Snow and the tall buildings of the capital vibrated with disturbing force. Members of the Valren Council studied the reports and tried to calm the public, but fear grew as the tremors became constant. The council soon discovered the truth. Their world's core was unstable. Something deep below the surface was breaking apart, and it would soon affect the crust. If the core collapsed, the entire planet could die. The council had never faced such danger. They were healers, gardeners, researchers, and planners, but none of them understood how to stabilize a dying world. After long debate, they agreed that they must ask for help from outside. A message was prepared and sent through secure channels to the Galactic Coalition. The plea described the problem and asked for skilled engineers, environmental experts, and advanced teams who could manage planetary emergencies. The Valren expected a gentle and thoughtful response. They believed that the Coalition would send its finest specialists. As the message traveled through the network of stations and relays, no one on Valren suspected that a technical error would push the signal into a much wider channel. The request did not stop within the Coalition. It spread further until it reached a place few Valren ever thought about. It reached Earth. The first hints of unexpected change came a week later when strange ships appeared in the sky. They were larger and heavier than any Coalition vessels the Valren had seen. Their metal skins were dark and scarred from many journeys. Their engines burned bright and loud, shaking the air as they slowed. When they landed, the ground shuddered as if answering the new force that had arrived. Curious citizens watched. From a safe distance, their long ears bent in confusion and worry. The doors of the ships opened, and humans stepped out. Humans were a species known in stories as Deathworlders. This name came from the harsh conditions of their home planet, which was filled with storms, quakes, predators, and many dangers. Because they survived such a violent world, humans became strong and adaptable. Some civilizations feared them, believing that humans might bring harm wherever they went. The Valren did not expect Earth to answer their message, and when they saw the humans walking confidently across the trembling ground, they felt their fear rise. A group of Valren leaders approached the humans with cautious steps. The human commander stepped forward. She was tall, with sharp eyes and a calm face. She greeted them with a friendly voice and introduced her team. She spoke simply, saying that they received the request for help and came as quickly as possible. The Valren were confused and asked if the Coalition had sent them. The commander explained that the message reached Earth through an open channel, that they decided to assist since the situation sounded critical. The council members tried to smile and act polite, but inside they felt anxious. Humans acted too relaxed and too eager in the middle of a planetary crisis. The commander listened to the explanation about the unstable core and then replied with a surprising tone of excitement. She said they had handled dangerous situations before and were ready to begin work right away. The Valren struggled to understand how anyone could treat such a problem with cheerful confidence. Human engineers set up equipment around the capital and placed sensors deep into the ground. They wore thick suits and heavy boots that allowed them to move across the shaking earth without fear. Every tremor that frightened the Valren only made the humans more focused. They walked near cracks in the ground and leaned over them without hesitation. They moved drilling machines into position and began taking samples from deep under the crust. The Valren watched in disbelief. No one from their own people would ever dare to stand so close to danger. Children and adults gathered at safe observation areas to watch the strange newcomers. They whispered about how humans seemed to lack fear. They whispered about how humans did not mind heat, dust, or noise. They whispered about how humans smiled even when alarms sounded on their machines. The Valren began to understand why the Coalition called the humans Deathworlders. These were people shaped by a world far more violent than anything the Valren had ever known. Despite their fear, the Valren could not deny that the human team worked quickly. They studied the core patterns, scanned energy levels, and compared the data with other planetary systems. After many hours, the human commander met again with the council. She explained that the situation was even worse than first believed. The core was not just unstable. Something was pushing it toward collapse. Then, the commander spoke in calm and steady tones, while the Valren leaders struggled to keep their own voices steady. The commander promised that her team would do everything possible to save the planet. She said they had experience with dangerous landscapes, extreme pressure systems, and unstable geological structures. The Valren did not understand half of what she said, but they listened closely because her voice carried confidence. Even though humans made them uneasy, they also brought a strange comfort. They looked like people who refused to give up. As the humans continued their work, more teams arrived with heavy tools and armored vehicles. They brought drills that could cut through stone, scanners that could reach the core, and machines that glowed with bright energy. They treated the unstable planet like a challenge instead of a threat. They even joked with each other while working, which confused the Valren even more. The tension between the two species grew in small ways each day. The Valren tried to offer soft foods and calming drinks, but the humans preferred strong flavors and hot meals. The Valren wanted quiet discussions, but the humans spoke loudly and laughed often. The Valren kept asking if it was safe to be near the shaking ground, and the humans always answered that it was fine. To the Valren, nothing about this was fine. To the humans, this was only another day of work. But despite the confusion, a bridge slowly began to form. Some humans noticed how nervous the Valren were and tried to speak kindly. Some Valren noticed how tirelessly the humans worked and began to admire their strength. Children who once hid behind their parents now watched with interest as humans set up shining machines that mapped the planet's interior. Late one evening, the ground shook harder than before. Buildings rattled so violently that alarms sounded. Across the city, many Valren cried out in fear. But the humans rushed toward the danger instead of away. They grabbed their gear, shouted quick instructions, and moved to secure the most unstable zones. They set stabilizing anchors and ran power lines across the ground, even as it cracked under their boots. Their actions were fast, bold, and fearless. When the tremor finally faded, the humans returned covered in dust and sweat. The Valren watched them with wide eyes. It was the first time they truly understood that these strange Deathworlders had come not to harm but to help. Their methods were wild, their courage unsettling, and their energy overwhelming. But every action they took was driven by the desire to protect a world that was not their own. The council gathered once more that night. They reviewed the progress, reports from the human commander. The threat to the planet was far from over, but there was now a plan forming. The humans were determined to find a way to stabilize the core. The Valren leaders sat in silence for a long time. Some were still, afraid of the humans. Some felt grateful. All knew that their world now depended on the strange visitors from Earth. The night sky above Valren glowed with the lights of human ships and the dimmed shimmer of distant stars. A gentle wind moved through the blue forests. In the quiet that followed the tremor, the Valren understood that their call for help had reached the most unexpected hands. They had asked for help, and the Deathworlders of Earth had come instead. The next morning, the world of Valren seemed quieter, but the tension in the air had not faded. The humans were already awake and moving across the city, carrying equipment and checking instruments. With determined energy, their boots clanged against the solid ground as they walked, and their voices carried clear across the streets. The Valren watched them from a distance, still unsure how to feel. These beings were both frightening and impressive, and every action they took reminded the Valryn that they were living on a world that humans might consider easy to survive, but which was deadly for anyone else. The human commander called her team together to review the data collected overnight. She pointed to readings from the core sensors and explained what each number meant. The Valryn listened, trying to understand, but much of it was too technical for them. They only caught the general meaning. The core was moving dangerously, faster than anyone had expected, and if it was not stabilized soon, cracks would spread across the entire surface. The humans spoke in calm, certain tones, as if danger was a puzzle to solve, rather than a disaster waiting to happen. Some Valryn could not hide their fear. One of the council members asked how the humans could be so brave in a world shaking. With the power of its own heart? The commander smiled slightly and said that they were used to danger. Humans had been raised on a planet that never gave them a moment of rest from storms, earthquakes, and unpredictable predators. They had learned to survive in any situation. This only made the Valryn more nervous, but they also felt a small flicker of hope. If these beings could survive anything, maybe they could save Valryn too. The humans began to divide into teams, each with a different purpose. One group moved deep into the forests to place new sensors in the trees and the soil. Another group went to the lakes to measure the energy coming from the planet's crust below. A third team began repairing broken buildings and roads damaged by the tremors, working quickly and efficiently. Everywhere they went, they left marks of their presence. Small devices glowing softly, protective anchors in the ground, and tracks, showing that no place was too dangerous for them. The Valryn started to follow them in small groups. Curious, despite their fear, they watched as humans handled molten rock as if it were soft clay. They watched humans place drills into cracks in the ground and operate machines that seemed far too large and heavy to function safely, and they watched humans joke and smile while doing it. The Valryn whispered among themselves that this was madness. Yet it was the kind of madness that might save their world. One human, a young man with short hair and a bright laugh, noticed a group of children watching from a hill. He waved and called out, showing them a small device that could measure the vibrations of the ground. The children gasped as numbers flashed on its screen, and colors changed with each tremor. The young man explained it in simple words, and for the first time, the children felt a small part of the problem they could understand. They began to cheer when he successfully measured a particularly large shake. Their fear was replaced for a moment by fascination, and the adults watched quietly. Realizing that humans were not only strong, but able to teach others how to cope with danger, the human commander then gathered her team to focus on the most urgent task, the core itself. They studied maps of the underground and discussed ideas. Rapidly, the Valryn tried to follow along, but even they could see that the humans' plan would be extraordinary. They would need to dig deep, reach into the unstable sections, place massive stabilizing devices directly inside the planet. It was a task that no Valryn could have imagined accomplishing, and the humans' excitement was visible. They spoke of challenges, of the thrill of danger, and of success that would be remembered across the stars. The Valryn scientists tried to offer advice. They suggested careful monitoring and gentle adjustments, but the humans shook their heads. They said they had a method that would not just stabilize the core, but protect the surface from sudden shocks. The Valryn were unsure whether to trust them or to panic, but they allowed the humans to proceed. Slowly, a mixture of awe and anxiety grew among the citizens. Humans were strange, dangerous, and fearless, yet there was a sense that they would not fail. As the day continued, small tremors grew stronger again. Buildings rattled, windows vibrated, and the ground cracked along weak points. Humans ran toward these areas without hesitation. They measured, drilled, and anchored equipment, often standing directly on the cracked earth while it shifted beneath them. The Valryn could hardly believe their eyes. Some screamed in fear, but others watched silently, realizing that panic would not stop what was coming. Humans were taking control where the Valryn could only watch helplessly. At one point, a particularly large tremor shook the capital. A deep crack opened across a street, threatening to swallow the sensors a human team had just installed. The humans leaped into action, carrying heavy supports and holding them in place while others secured the equipment. They coordinated without words, using gestures and quick commands. The Valran leaders observed closely, noting how humans seemed to trust each other completely. Where one might see danger, they saw an opportunity to act. By late afternoon, the tremors had calmed slightly, and the humans gathered for a brief rest. They shared food and water from containers that looked unusual to the Valrine. The Valrine watched, curious about these strange habits, and some of them even approached slowly to offer assistance. A few humans smiled and thanked them, showing that they appreciated kindness even in a world under threat. A bridge was slowly forming between the two species, built on observation, action, and mutual need. The Valran children began to follow the humans more closely. They wanted to see how the machines worked and how the humans survived in dangerous conditions. The humans did not mind. They explained carefully, showing how each tool had a purpose and how they protected themselves from the hazards of the unstable ground. The children learned quickly. The adults watched with a mix of fear and admiration. That evening, the human commander spoke with the council once more. She outlined the plan to reach deeper into the core. The Valran could see from her gestures that she was confident, but they could also see the seriousness in her face. She explained that the next step would be more dangerous than anything they had done so far, and that they would need to monitor every movement carefully. She reassured them that humans had survived similar dangers on their home planet and had never failed. The Valren listened, some trembling, some hopeful, but all aware that the fate of their world depended on what would happen next. As night fell, humans continued their work under portable lights. The tremors had not stopped completely, but the humans moved as if they were dancing across danger. They adjusted instruments, reinforced supports, and scanned the ground with glowing devices. Occasionally, a loud laugh or shouted command broke the silence, reminding the Valran that humans were unafraid even in the midst of chaos. In the quiet moments, some Valran ventured close to the humans. They asked simple questions about their world, about their lives, and about why they were willing to risk so much. The humans answered simply, they helped because they could, because it was the right thing to do, and because no world should fall while people could try to save it.
Ow.
The Valran felt a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. They had asked for help, but these Deathworlders from Earth were offering far more than that. By the end of the night, the Valran leaders gathered again in their council chamber. They spoke softly, reviewing the progress and the strange courage of the humans. The tremors continued, but the machines humans had placed seemed to hold small areas stable. For the first time in many days, the Valran felt that maybe, just maybe, there was hope. They realized that they were witnessing a kind of bravery and skill they had never known, and that it came from beings who had survived worlds that were harsher than their own. The night sky over Valran shone with stars, human lights, and the calm reflection of the crystal lakes. Even with danger still present, a sense of trust was growing. The humans were fearless, strong, and determined. They were strange, wild, and powerful, but they were here to help. The Valran realized that their world had received far more than expected. It asked for help, but what arrived was a force that could face death itself and still move forward. The people of Valren went to sleep that night with minds full of wonder and fear. They knew the humans would continue their work through the night, watching, adjusting, and risking everything to save the planet. And they knew that when the sun rose again, the Deathworlders of Earth would still be there, walking calmly across. A trembling world, bringing hope with every step. The humans had been on Valren for several days now, and their presence was changing the city slowly. Machines hummed and glowed along streets and in parks, and strange drills and sensors had been set in every corner where tremors seemed strongest. The Valran watched constantly, still nervous, still unsure if the humans were safe, but they could see progress. The ground was not perfectly stable, but the humans were controlling what they could, and that made the people feel that perhaps their world might survive. The human commander called her a team together early one morning. She had studied the data from the last tremors and noticed a pattern. The ground beneath the central lake seemed to be heating unusually fast. If the heat continued to rise, could trigger another series of cracks and explosions that might destroy everything in the capital city. She explained to her team that they needed to go deeper than ever before, under the lake, to place stabilizing anchors directly in the planet's crust. The Valran leaders listened in shock. No one from their world had ever thought of drilling. Under the lake, it was far too dangerous. The commander, however, spoke with calm confidence, and the humans quickly prepared their equipment. The task was enormous. Giant drills and machines had to be moved into position, supported by floating platforms in the middle of the lake. The water was heated by the tremors, bubbling in certain areas, and the currents were unpredictable. Humans did not seem worried. They moved like they had done this many times before, although the Valran could not imagine any human world having lakes that behaved in such a way. The Valran tried to advise caution, warning of unstable ground and dangerous currents, but the humans nodded politely and continued without hesitation. As the machines began their work, small tremors shook the area again. Some of the Valran panicked, moving away from the shaking water and shouting warnings to the humans. The humans continued their work without slowing down. They monitored each tremor with glowing devices, adjusted the position of the drills, and supported each platform with reinforced cables. Slowly, the lake's heat began to stabilize in small areas, and the humans cheered quietly when their readings improved. The Valran had never seen anyone so calm in the middle of such chaos. While the machines worked under the lake, another group of humans investigated the cause of the instability more deeply. They had studied maps of Valran's core and discovered something shocking. The problem was not natural. Someone, somewhere in the galaxy, had sabotaged the planet. Deep channels beneath the surface had been deliberately weakened, and small devices had been placed to accelerate the core's instability. Humans had detected traces of energy patterns that did not belong to the planet. The Valran listened with horror. No one had ever thought that another civilization might want their world to die. The commander explained that this was serious. If the saboteurs were allowed to remain, they could strike again, even while humans worked to save the planet. She instructed a small team to track these devices and identify the source. They would need to act quickly but carefully. The Valran tried to understand, but their minds were not trained for this kind of danger. They could only watch as humans prepared for a task that seemed impossible. Meanwhile, the main team continued to work under the lake. Machines dug deep into the earth, while humans operated them, guiding drills and placing anchors in precise positions. Tremors and heat challenged them, but they adapted quickly. When a platform threatened to tip, humans pushed it back into place, sometimes using their own weight to stabilize it. The Valran could not believe their eyes. No one else could act with such fearlessness. The young human who had taught the children about the sensors stayed on the shore, explaining the process to any Valran who watched. He showed how the drills measured vibration and how anchors could support the planet's crust. The Valran were fascinated. For the first time, they understood that humans did not just survive dangerous worlds, they controlled them. They could use strength, courage, intelligence together to achieve results that seemed impossible. As the day continued, the tremors grew stronger again. A particularly violent one shook the lake so violently that some of the floating platforms tilted dangerously. The humans ran to the edge, securing the machines and using cables and pulleys to hold everything in place. The Valran watched in horror. They could not imagine stepping onto a platform that might fall into boiling water, but humans moved with calm certainty. One even smiled as he adjusted a cable, as if the danger were exciting rather than threatening. The team tracking. The sabotage devices reported back with disturbing news. The signals they detected led them to small satellites orbiting Valran. Someone had placed these devices deliberately to destabilize the planet's core. The humans analyzed the satellites and discovered codes that identified the rogue group responsible. It was a small faction within the Galactic Coalition that hoped to gain power by threatening weak planets. The Valran could not understand the cruelty of such a plan. The humans, however, did not hesitate. They prepared to confront the saboteurs directly and neutralize the threat. Late in the evening, the human commander walked along the lake shore, reviewing plans with the Valran leaders. She explained that the next step would be to combine the work under the lake with measures on land to stabilize the planet fully. The humans would continue to dig, anchor, and adjust, while another team prepared to deal with the rogue faction. The Valren nodded, though they were still fearful. They had never faced enemies like this, and the humans' calm attitude amazed them. They began to realize that the humans did not see danger as something to avoid. They saw it as something to overcome. Night fell, but the work did not stop. Human lights glowed across the city and lake, and machines hummed continuously. Tremors shook the ground at intervals, but humans adjusted immediately, using their devices to stabilize affected areas. They communicated with quick gestures and short commands, moving together as one coordinated force. The Valren observed from a distance, understanding that the humans were not afraid of failure. They had trained their minds and bodies to act in situations that no Valren could endure. The young man with the sensors continued teaching children, even in the dark. He showed how tremors affected different parts of the planet, and how the machines responded. The children were fascinated and began repeating measurements themselves. The first time they felt they were part of the effort to save their world. Some adults joined, eager to learn. Humans welcomed them, explaining. With patience and care, the Valren started to see that humans were not only strong, they shared knowledge freely, even in the most dangerous situations. Meanwhile, the human security team prepared for their mission against the rogue satellites. They studied maps of orbit paths, communication signals, and energy traces. They explained to the Valren leaders that they could neutralize the threat without harming the planet or its people. The Valren marveled at this precision. Even in danger, the humans acted carefully, thinking several steps ahead. It was a combination of courage, intelligence, and planning that the Valren had never seen before. As the first stars appeared in the sky, the humans under the lake made a breakthrough. They had drilled far enough to place stabilizing anchors deep into the core. Machines began transmitting new energy patterns designed to control the tremors. Slowly, the violent shaking subsided in areas around the capital. The Valren leaders watched, their hearts pounding as humans worked tirelessly. One anchor after another locked into place, and small sections of the city that had been trembling began to hold steady. The commander walked along the shore. Checking her team's progress, she nodded in approval as updates came in from the sabotage tracking team. The satellites were now within range, and humans were preparing their method to neutralize them. The Valren could only watch in awe. Humans were fearless and unstoppable in ways they could not imagine. Where the Valren had only feared, humans acted. Where the Valren hesitated, humans moved. And with every action, the planet's survival seemed more possible. By midnight, some areas of the city were calmer than they had been in days. The lake still bubbled in places, and the ground still shook occasionally, but humans had already stabilized critical points. Citizens cautiously returned to watch from safe distances, whispering among themselves about the strange visitors who could do what seemed impossible. Children waved to the humans who smiled back, showing that despite danger, they remained kind. And patient, the Valren leaders gathered quietly. They spoke in soft tones about what they had witnessed. Humans were more than survivors. They were warriors, engineers, teachers, and helpers all at once. They risked their lives for a world that was not theirs, and they faced danger with joy, not fear. The leaders realized that the humans were not only helping, they were teaching the Valren how courage, skill, and determination could overcome almost anything. As the night deepened, humans continued their work under the lake, while another team moved quietly to deal with the rogue satellites in orbit. Valren looked up at the sky and saw the glow of machines far above them. The humans were everywhere, moving with purpose and confidence. For the first time, the people felt that maybe their world could be saved. They had asked for help, and the Deathworlders of Earth had arrived. They were fearless, strong, and relentless, and they would not stop until the planet was safe. The humans had been working on Valren for many days, and their presence was now felt across the entire city. Machines and instruments covered streets, parks, and lakes, glowing softly as they measured tremors. Heat and energy from the planet's core. The Valren had begun to trust the humans, though fear still lingered in their hearts. The humans. Moved with purpose, fearless and tireless, adjusting, repairing, and guiding each other through dangers that would have frightened anyone from Valrin. Every tremor that shook the ground seemed only to push the humans forward. And the Valrin watched in awe as machines held steady and anchors sank deep into the crust. The human commander called her teams together early in the morning to review the latest readings. They had detected a new problem. Deep cracks were forming near the northern mountains, areas the Valrin had considered stable. If these cracks spread, entire regions could collapse, and the planet's core could destabilize. Further, the commander explained that they needed to act immediately, sending specialized teams to secure the northern region. While continuing work under the lake, the Valren leaders were alarmed. The north was difficult to reach, with rough terrain and dangerous energy flows. But the humans accepted the challenge without hesitation. Humans began moving their heavy machines across the mountains, setting up sensors and stabilizing anchors along rocky ridges and deep valleys. They used climbing equipment, cables, and reinforced vehicles to carry supplies and instruments over uneven ground. Tremors made the task harder, but humans adapted quickly, changing positions and adjusting machines to prevent accidents. Valren followed from a distance, amazed at how humans could work in conditions that would have crushed anyone from their own world. They whispered to each other that these were not normal beings, and that their courage and strength were unlike anything they had ever seen. While the northern teams worked, another group of humans focused on the sabotage devices that had been discovered in orbit. They analyzed the energy signals, tracing them back to small hidden satellites that orbited the planet in silent patterns. The humans explained to the Valren leaders that these satellites were controlling some of the core's instability. If left unchecked, the devices could trigger another wave of tremors. The Valren felt a cold fear, but the humans reassured them. They would neutralize the satellites safely without causing damage to the planet as the day progressed. Small tremors continued to shake the northern mountains. Rocks tumbled, and heat vents released bursts of energy. Humans moved calmly, holding heavy equipment in place, securing anchors, and communicating with short, precise words. They worked together seamlessly, each person anticipating the needs of the others. The Valren could see that humans were not only fearless but intelligent and resourceful. They used their surroundings as tools, creating paths, supports, and structures out of the rocks and debris that others would have avoided. One young human, carrying sensors on a high ridge, noticed a crack widening faster than expected. He shouted instructions to his team, who immediately adjusted cables and repositioned equipment. The Valren watching from below gasped, worried for the humans. Yet in moments, the crack stabilized, and the machines held steady. The young human smiled, as if this small victory was part of the adventure. The Valren could not understand how anyone could be calm while the ground shook violently beneath them. Yet the humans acted with confidence, knowing their skills would succeed. Meanwhile, the commander coordinated with the orbital team. Humans moved swiftly to capture the rogue satellites, using small spacecraft that could maneuver between them. Carefully disabled the energy emitters, preventing any sudden destabilization of the core. The Valren observed from observation, towers barely daring to breathe. They had never imagined such precision and courage. The satellites were captured and the sabotage devices deactivated without a single failure. Humans celebrated quietly, nodding to each other with satisfaction. While the Valren looked on in disbelief, back on the mountains, humans continued placing stabilizing anchors deep into the cracks and fissures. They measured vibrations, adjusted machines, and reinforced weak points with glowing devices that spread energy evenly across the rocks. Tremors were still frequent, but the humans' work slowed the spreading cracks and prevented further collapse. Slowly, the northern region began to stabilize. The Valren leaders, who had been tense and anxious all day, felt a surge of hope. The humans were making progress where they had feared disaster. As night fell, the the humans set up temporary camps along the mountain ridges. Fires glowed softly, and machines continued to hum.
Ow!
The Valren watched cautiously from the valleys below. Some children crept closer, fascinated by the humans' courage and cleverness. One young girl asked a human why they were willing to risk so much for a world that was not theirs. The human knelt down and explained simply that life was valuable, no matter where it came from, and that they would not abandon anyone in danger. The girl nodded, wide-eyed, realizing that the human's bravery was different from anything she had seen. The commander gathered her teams for a final review of the day. She explained that tomorrow would be critical. The northern mountains were now stable enough for larger stabilizing structures, but the work was far from over. Tremors could still appear in other regions, and the sabotage devices had been neutralized. But the planet's core remained delicate. Humans planned to continue under the lake, across the mountains, and in other areas where instability was highest. The Valren listened carefully, understanding that survival depended on this relentless effort. Late at night, humans walked among the Valren who had stayed near the camps. They shared stories of their home planet, explaining how they had survived storms, earthquakes, and dangerous creatures. The Valren listened in amazement, learning that humans were shaped by worlds far harsher than their own. Humans explained that fear could be useful, but courage and action were what truly mattered. The Valren began to understand that the human's fearlessness was not reckless, which is a skill honed through experience and necessity. In the early hours, tremors began again in a distant region of the city. Humans moved immediately, dividing into teams, racing to stabilize weak points before damage could spread. The Valren could not keep up with their speed or precision. Humans climbed buildings, carried heavy anchors, and adjusted machines while the ground shook violently. One human lifted a large support into a collapsing structure, while another held a cable, stabilizing it long enough for the device to lock in place. The Valren held their breath, realizing that without the humans, the city would have been destroyed. The humans worked tirelessly through the night, rotating shifts to maintain constant attention on critical areas.
Ow.
They communicated through gestures, in short commands, ensuring that every anchor, sensor, and machine functioned perfectly. The Valren watched quietly, realizing that humans did not only solve problems, they adapted, learned, and acted faster than anyone else could. Their combination of courage, intelligence, and skill was unmatched. By dawn, the northern mountains were fully stabilized. Tremors were still present in minor areas, but critical structures held steady. Humans checked every machine, adjusted every anchor, and confirmed that the energy flows from the planet's core were under control. The Valren leaders gathered in awe, realizing that their world had been saved from near collapse by beings they barely understood. They had asked for help, but what had arrived was far more than they could have imagined. The commander walked through the stabilized areas, checking her team and ensuring that everything was secure. She nodded at the Valren leaders who could not find the words to express their gratitude. Humans continued their work with quiet determination, not seeking praise, but focused entirely on the planet's survival. The Valren realized that this was why humans were called Deathworlders, not because they were dangerous, because they could survive, adapt, and act where others would fail. As the sun rose over the mountains, casting light on stabilized ridges and calm valleys, the humans prepared for the next phase of their work. They would continue under the lake, across unstable plains, and wherever tremors threatened. The Valren could only follow from a distance, watching with awe and hope. They had asked for help, and the Deathworlders of Earth had come. They were fearless, skilled, and relentless, and they had already saved the northern mountains. For the first time, the Valren felt a sense of safety. They still feared the unknown, still trembled at every shake of the ground, but they also knew that humans were there, acting where others would only watch. The planet's survival depended on them, and the humans would not fail. The Valren could see it in every action, every careful adjustment, in every step taken toward danger without hesitation. Their world had been touched by courage and strength beyond imagination, and they understood that the future, though still uncertain, brighter because of these extraordinary visitors from Earth. The humans had been working on Valrin for many days, and their presence had become the center of hope for the Valrin people. Machines hummed across the city, the mountains, and the lake, measuring vibrations and stabilizing the planet's crust. The Valrin watched constantly, learning to trust the humans, though fear still lingered. The humans moved with focus and skill, fearless in the face of tremors, heat, and unstable ground. Every action they took reminded the Valrin that their world depended on beings who treated danger as a challenge to overcome. Early one morning, the human commander gathered her teams. The orbital team had located the rogue satellites responsible for the planet's instability, and they were ready to intercept them. The satellites were small but dangerous, capable of sending energy pulses that could worsen the core's tremors. Humans prepared carefully, checking their equipment, communication links, and propulsion systems. The Valrin watched anxiously from observation towers, unsure what to expect. The humans reassured them calmly that no harm would come to the planet. During this operation, the orbital team launched their small spacecraft, moving quickly and precisely, and they approached the satellites, dodging minor energy pulses and debris. One human extended a small robotic arm to grab the first satellite while another monitored energy readings. Satellites spun and glowed with strange colors. But the humans adjusted immediately. They captured each device, disabled its energy output, and secured them for transport. The Valrin could hardly believe what they were seeing. Humans moved faster, smarter, and calmer than anyone they had ever known. While the orbital team neutralized the satellites, the main human force continued their work on the surface. The northern mountains had been stabilized, but other areas still required attention. Tremors were appearing in new places, and machines had to be relocated, anchors reinforced, and sensors recalibrated. Humans moved as if the planet were a puzzle. To solve, they climbed rocks, adjusted cables, and lifted heavy equipment without hesitation. The Valrin observed in awe, realizing that the humans' fearlessness and skill were keeping their world alive. A particularly strong tremor shook the central city. Buildings rattled, streets cracked, and alarms sounded across the city. Humans rushed toward the danger. They measured vibrations with glowing instruments, adjusted heavy anchors, and reinforced weakened structures. One human carried a massive support beam across a collapsing street, while another held it steady as machines fixed it in place. The Valrin watched with bated breath, unable to move from fear. Yet humans acted calmly, as if chaos was only another challenge to overcome. The young human who had taught the children about sensors worked alongside them again. He showed how the tremor readings indicated weak points in the city and explained how the humans' machines stabilized those areas. Children and adults gathered around, learning quickly and asking questions. The humans answered patiently, showing the Valrin that courage was not enough. They also needed knowledge and careful planning. Slowly, the people began to understand, realizing that the human strength came from a combination of skill, experience, and determination. By afternoon, the orbital team returned, carrying the captured satellites. The commander explained that the devices had been deactivated and that the rogue faction responsible had been identified. The Valrin listened in shock. He could not believe that a group within the Galactic Coalition had planned to destroy their planet for power. The humans, however, were already preparing the next steps. They would report the rogue faction to the Coalition and ensure they could not harm Valrin again. The Valrin were amazed at the humans' courage, not only in saving their planet, but in confronting those who threatened it. Meanwhile, the humans on the surface continued reinforcing the planet's core. They placed additional anchors in unstable areas, adjusted machines under the lake, and monitored energy flows from the crust. Tremors still occurred, but they were smaller and less frequent. The humans adapted immediately to each new challenge, moving with a combination of speed, intelligence, and strength that no Valrin could match. The Valrin realized that these Deathworlders from Earth were not reckless. They were masters of survival, trained to face impossible odds and succeed. As the day ended, humans gathered at a central observation point to review progress. Discussed areas still at risk, machines that required maintenance, and regions that could be stabilized further. Leaders watched, realizing that humans did not work for praise or recognition. They worked because it was necessary, because they believed life was valuable, and because they could not ignore danger when they had the power to act. The Valrhon felt a mix of fear, admiration, and gratitude. Late at night, tremors began again. In a distant region, humans immediately divided into teams, moving quickly to stabilize the area. They climbed rocks, carried heavy anchors, and adjusted machines while the ground shook violently beneath them. One human used a long cable to secure a drifting sensor, while another reinforced a cracked ridge. The Valrhon could not keep up with their speed or coordination, but they watched silently, understanding that without the humans, the city and mountains would have been destroyed. Meanwhile, the commander coordinated the orbital team, ensuring that no remaining rogue satellites could interfere. Humans worked with precision, capturing signals and monitoring energy outputs. The Valrhon marveled at how humans could manage danger both on the planet's surface and in space at the same time. It was a combination of intelligence, courage, and coordination that seemed impossible to them. In the early hours, the humans under the lake made another breakthrough. Machines reached deep into the core, placing stabilizing devices in critical points. Energy flows that had threatened the city now shifted into controlled patterns. Tremors became smaller and less frequent. The Valrhon leaders watched in silence, feeling relief for the first time since the crisis began. The humans were not only fighting the instability, they were winning. The young human with the sensors taught the children about this progress. He explained how small adjustments in machines could change the planet's energy flows and prevent collapses. Children listened closely, asking questions and repeating measurements themselves. Adults joined, learning how to monitor the ground, how to measure tremors, and how humans controlled the dangerous conditions. The Valrhon realized that the humans were not only saving their world, they were teaching them to survive and understand it. By dawn, the city and mountains were much calmer. Critical areas were stabilized, machines held steady, and energy flows from the core were under control. Humans checked every instrument, reinforced every anchor, and confirmed that the planet's surface was secure. The Valrhon leaders gathered to review the results, realizing that their world had been saved by beings they barely understood. They had asked for help, but the Deathworlders of Earth had arrived with courage, intelligence, and skill beyond imagination. The commander walked through the stabilized regions, checking her teams and ensuring that everything was secure. She nodded to the Valrhon leaders, who could not find words to express their gratitude. Humans continued their work with quiet determination, focused entirely on the planet's survival. The Valrhon understood now why humans were called Deathworlders, not because they were dangerous, but because they could survive, adapt, and act where others would fail. As the sun rose, casting light on calm streets, stable mountains, and quiet lakes, humans prepared for the next phase of work. They would continue. Under the lake, across the plains, and wherever tremors threatened, the Valrhon could only follow from a distance, watching with awe and hope. They had asked for help, and the Deathworlders of Earth had come. They were fearless, skilled, and relentless, and they had already saved critical parts of the planet. The first time the Valrhon felt a sense of safety. Tremors still occurred, but humans were there to act immediately. The Valrhon began to understand that humans did not fear danger. They used it, controlled it, and turned it into action. The planet's survival depended on them, and the humans would not fail. The Valrhon realized that their world had been touched by courage and skill beyond imagination, and that the future, though still uncertain, was brighter because of these extraordinary visitors from Earth. The humans had been on Valrhon for many days, and their work was reaching its most critical stage. The machines under the lake continued to stabilize the core. The mountains were secure, and tremors across the city were much smaller and less frequent. The Valrhon had begun to feel hope, though their fears still lingered in quiet corners. Humans moved calmly through every unstable area, climbing rocks, adjusting anchors, and monitoring energy flows with a precision that no Valrin could match. They acted as if danger were nothing more than another problem to solve, and the Valrin watched, learning and slowly understanding that this was true courage. The human commander called her teams together early in the morning. Today, she explained, they would complete the stabilization of the planet's core. The anchors under the lake were in place, the mountains had been reinforced, and the machines had been tested to their limits. The final step required all teams to work together, placing additional stabilizers across the surface in areas still showing small tremors. The Valrin listened with concern. They had never imagined any species could act so boldly, yet they also saw the humans' confidence and determination. Humans began moving across the city, the mountains, and the lake simultaneously. Teams climbed ridges, adjusted machines under the lake, and placed additional stabilizers in low-lying areas. Tremors shook the ground, but humans adjusted immediately, moving machines, reinforcing anchors, and monitoring vibrations. The Valrine watched silently, unable to keep up, but slowly understanding that humans did not just survive in danger, they controlled it. Every action was measured, deliberate, and designed to protect the planet. While the surface teams worked, the orbital team continued monitoring the galaxy for any remaining threats. The rogue satellites had been neutralized, and humans confirmed that the faction responsible for the sabotage could not intervene further. As humans explained how they had tracked signals, captured devices, and disabled them safely, the Valrine were amazed. Not only were the humans strong and fearless, but they were careful, smart, and precise in everything they did. In the central city, a particularly strong tremor struck. Buildings shook, streets cracked, and citizens cried out in fear. Humans rushed toward the danger without hesitation. They carried heavy anchors, adjusted machines, and stabilized structures while the ground shifted violently beneath them. One human used a long cable to hold a sensor in place, while another lifted a support beam across a collapsing street. The Valrin watched with wide eyes, realizing that these beings had no fear and that their courage was saving lives and stabilizing the planet. Simultaneously, the young human who had taught the children about sensors walked with them through a safe observation area. He explained how the tremors were measured, how machines adjusted energy flows, and how the anchors held the ground together. Children repeated measurements under his guidance, and adults began to understand the principles as well. The Valrin realized that humans were not only solving problems, they were teaching them to understand danger and to act wisely. For the first time, the people felt that they could survive and help in their own way. As the day progressed, humans placed the final stabilizing anchors across the city, mountains, and lake. Machines hummed and glowed, energy flows from the core became controlled, and tremors were reduced to minor vibrations. The Valrin could see that the planet's survival depended entirely on humans, and that without them, disaster would have struck. Yet the humans did not seek praise or rest. They continued their work quietly, ensuring that every area was secure, every machine functioning, and every anchor holding perfectly. The commander gathered her teams for a final review. She instructed them to monitor the planet continuously until the core was fully stable and every tremor had ceased. The Valrin watched as humans coordinated across the city, mountains, and lake, communicating with gestures, short commands, and glowing screens. Tremors continued occasionally, but humans adjusted immediately, preventing further damage. The Valrin realized that humans had become the steady heart of their world, fearless and unstoppable in ways they could barely comprehend. By evening, the planet was calmer than it had been in weeks. Machines had stabilized critical areas, energy flows were under control, and the worst tremors had stopped. The Valrin leaders gathered to express their gratitude. Words felt inadequate, but the commander listened with a quiet smile and said simply that they had done what they could. Humans worked not for thanks, but because they believed in protecting life wherever it existed. The Valrin felt a mixture of awe and relief, understanding that humans were different from anyone they had ever known. Late at night, the humans walked among the Valrin who had remained near the city. They shared stories of Earth, explaining how humans survived storms, earthquakes, and dangerous creatures. The Valren listened, learning that humans were shaped by a world far harsher than their own. Humans explained that courage was important, but intelligence, skill, and teamwork were what truly made them effective. The Valren began to see that the humans' fearlessness was not reckless, it was disciplined, tested, and trained through experience. The young human continued teaching children about the machines, showing how stabilizers and sensors worked to protect the planet. He explained that understanding the ground, energy flows, and tremors could help anyone act wisely in danger. Children listened carefully, repeating measurements and observing results. Adults joined, asking questions and learning how to monitor and respond to instability. The Valren realized that the humans were not only saving their world, they were giving them knowledge, courage, and understanding to survive in the future. As dawn approached, the final tremors slowed and disappeared. Machines under the lake, across the mountains, and in the city hummed steadily. Energy flows were balanced, and the planet was stable for the first time in weeks. Humans checked each instrument, confirmed every anchor, and ensured that no area remained at risk. The Valren leaders gathered quietly, filled with relief and gratitude. Their world had been saved by beings they barely understood. They had watched courage, skill, and determination in its purest form. The commander walked through the city and mountains, inspecting her team's work. She nodded in approval at every machine and anchor. The Valren followed at a distance, feeling a sense of safety they had never known. The humans' work was almost complete, yet their dedication continued. They ensured that the planet's energy flows, tremors, and core movements were fully monitored and controlled. The Valren realized that the humans' presence had changed their world forever, showing them that fear could be faced and overcome with courage, knowledge, and teamwork. By midday, the humans began to prepare for departure. Their machines and equipment had stabilized the planet, and the rogue satellites had been neutralized. The Valren watched as humans dismantled temporary equipment and prepared to leave. There was a quiet sadness among the people, for they had grown to trust these visitors and to rely on their skill and courage. Yet there was also deep gratitude. Humans had arrived when hope seemed lost, faced every danger without fear, and saved their planet from destruction. Before leaving, the commander addressed the Valren leaders. She explained that humans would always be ready to help other worlds in danger, and that courage, intelligence, and determination were universal tools for survival. The Valren leaders nodded, understanding for the first time the meaning of the Deathworlders' reputation. Humans did not bring destruction, they brought the ability to survive, adapt, and overcome impossible odds. As the human ships lifted from the ground and climbed into the sky, the Valren watched silently. How tremors had stopped. Energy flows were controlled, and the city, mountains, and lake were stable. The humans waved from the ships, smiling, showing kindness and reassurance even as they departed. The Valren felt a deep respect for these visitors from Earth, understanding that they had been saved not only by skill but by courage and determination beyond anything they had known. The sky over, Valren glowed with human ship lights and distant stars. The people felt a mixture of relief, awe, and hope. Their world had been saved, and they had learned something important, that courage, intelligence, and teamwork could overcome even the most impossible challenges. They had asked for help, and the Deathworlders of Earth had come. They had faced danger without fear, solved problems no one else could, and left the planet safe for future generations. The Valren went about their world, touching the stable ground, observing the calm lake, and walking safely across mountains that had once trembled violently. Children told stories of the humans' courage, of machines glowing under the lake, and of tremors controlled by skillful hands. Adults spoke quietly of the commander and her teams, realizing that hope and survival could exist even in the darkest times. By nightfall, Valren understood something they had not before. Humans were not just beings from another world, they were examples of what could be achieved when fear was met with courage, knowledge, and determination. The planet was safe, and the Valren knew that their world had been touched forever by beings who ran toward danger rather than away from it. And as the last human ships disappeared into the stars, the Valren realized that their planet was alive, stable, and thriving once more. They had asked for help, but what had arrived was far greater than help. They had received hope, courage, and the knowledge that even in the most impossible situations, life could survive when extraordinary beings were willing to fight for it.